Hello class, and welcome to the reading review video for structuring arguments. We'll start on page 121. We have two very important terms for constructing academic arguments: inductive reasoning and deductive reasoning. It's a matter of how you present your evidence. Inductive reasoning is like making an educated guess where you base your claim on facts, but you don't know 100% for sure. If we look at the example, they give three examples of dairy products affecting them negatively: ice cream, cheese, and asthma. So they conclude dairy is going to make them sick, right? But there's still other dairy products that they haven't tried, right? Ice cream, cheese, and asthma. I'm sorry, ice cream, cheese, and yogurt, right? I get hives after eating ice cream. My mouth swells up when I eat cheese. Yogurt triggers my asthma. Therefore, dairy products make me sick, right? That's inductive reasoning. If you infer, right, when you make an inference is a conclusion about the unknown based on the known, and infer is the verb form. If you infer that there's going to be a reading review quiz every day on the boldface terms, that's based on the facts that there usually is a reading review quiz. But you won't know until you get that assignment for sure, for 100% certain. So it's about building up facts to make a claim or to come to a conclusion, to make an inference. Deductive reasoning does the opposite. It starts with a general principle that you know 100% is true, and then it has a specific idea that follows underneath it. Therefore, you can come to a conclusion that you know for sure. Reverse the example, right? So dairy products make me sick. You know that for certain. Okay, right? You get a lactose test, you're lactose intolerant, right? So then ice cream is a dairy product. You know that for sure. So you know if you're allergic to lactose and you eat ice cream, you're going to get sick, right? Conclusion: ice cream makes me sick. Ice cream will make me sick. Unfortunately, in life, there's a lot of things where we know they're bad for us, but we do it anyway because pathos overcomes logos. And unfortunately, I've made those illogical decisions too. So, inductive and deductive reasoning are some critical thinking strategies that we can use when we're evaluating and constructing arguments. As we turn to page 122, we're informed about the classical oration, right? And it's essentially a way to come to a conclusion based on the different parts of an argument by analyzing them, by constructing them. And it's very similar to our legal system. But again, what does it do? Well, look on page 123 with me, right? You get background on the subject, which is what we do in our intro paragraphs. You present the lines of argument, which is what we do in our intro paragraph. You present your claim. Then throughout your argument, right, you present your claim and your support in the intro, and then as you prove your argument, you will consider alternative arguments as well, right? And you will use Rogerian strategy and exhibit understanding and empathy, right, when examining the alternative arguments, but then your conclusion should reiterate your point, your support, and you should kind of reflect on the bigger picture. So the classical oration, those Greek strategies, are important to understand, not just so we can understand how things like our legal system work, but how structuring our own arguments, how we can benefit from those strategies. Now, again, it always comes down to Rogerian strategy. And if you turn to page 126 with me, right, Rogerian and invitational arguments, again, this notion of context, this notion of understanding, of empathy. I always like to point out how the majority of the arguments that we read throughout the semester all have a Rogerian perspective. And all have a Rogerian perspective, and it's important that you also adopt that same perspective and use Rogerian argument when you're constructing your own arguments, not just for this class, but when writing for other classes and when making decisions and dealing with situations in life. Rogerian strategy can be very helpful. It's always important to have a sense of understanding and empathy. The next strategy on page 130 that we also will consider and probably incorporate the majority of the Toulmin argument concepts in our own writing is just that, Toulmin argument, right? The important thing to think about is, right, it consists of claim, qualifiers, evidence, warrants, and backing. Now, the claim we've been discussing throughout the semester, right, your argument. The qualifiers, this is very important. There any limits that you want to put on your claims. Think about Kathy Freston, right? She puts the qualifier less, right? If Americans care about the environment, we should eat less meat. She doesn't say everybody should be 100%. So qualifiers are usually words that limit the claim, and a lot of times they're adjectives or adverbs, right? How much meat, right? Adverbs answer the question how. How much meat? Less meat, right? Adjectives answer the question what kind, right? So a lot of times putting an adjective or an adverb in your claim to help qualify it will help your readers better understand how you are being more Rogerian and understanding. The reasons are obviously the evidence, the facts, the examples, the details. Now the warrants are the underlying assumptions that support your claim. So when you think about Kathy Freston's vegetarian is the new Prius, her claim, right? Let's look at it from a Toulmin's standpoint. Her claim, Americans should eat less meat, right? Because it's bad for the environment. Her qualifier is less. Her support is all of the manure, the effects on water, shortages, global warming, climate change, all of that, right? She gives logical, factual reasons why raising animals, transporting animals, consuming animals for food, right? Raising, transporting, and consuming animals for food, all those are her supporting ideas, all have a negative effect on the environment. Now here's where it gets interesting. Her warrant, right? Americans should eat less meat because it's bad for the environment. Well, what's the link? That you care about the environment. So, unfortunately, some people, right, it's the underlying assumptions that support your claim. She assumes, right, in the 21st century that her readers care about the environment, but there are some people that don't care about the environment. So if you don't care about the environment, there's no link between the claim and the reason, therefore there's no warrant, right? So people might say, well, I don't care about the environment, therefore the argument does not make persuasive sense to them. So that's a good way of understanding the different parts of Toulmin argument by applying it to Freston's essay. On page 132, right, if you follow along with me, there's 4 bullet points, all possible ways to structure your essays and to offer evidence and details. We've been talking about these facts, citations, sources, personal anecdotes, personal experiences, right? Remember, an anecdote can be an observation of something you've read or seen, right? Or actually personally experienced. So again, these are all strategies that are helpful. You have the various examples of claims, reasons, and warrants for different arguments throughout the chapter. I think they do a nice job of explaining all of those. So what I'd like to do is kind of skip ahead to the section on qualifiers and understanding the conditions of rebuttal. As we know, qualifiers, right, words that put limits on claims, and we have so many examples here on 140. Refresh with those. Instead of saying all, say few. Instead of saying always, say it is possible, right? Instead of every time, rarely. You get where I'm going with this. Instead of saying all, some, right? Instead of every time, sometimes. I like one of my favorites is one might argue. Hmm. And as the chapter is coming to a close, right before we get to our final outline of the Toolman argument on banning e-cigarettes, which is a very interesting one, on page 143, please just have a look at page 141 with me. As far as conditions of rebuttal, their potential objections to an argument, and understanding and reacting to these conditions are essential to support your own claims where they're weak, and also to recognize and understand the reasonable objections of people who see the world differently. The reasonable objections of people who see the world differently. I cannot stress enough how important Rogerian's strategy is, and you should always consider the other side of it, the other perspective, the conditions of rebuttal. And when you better understand Rogerian, you have empathy, you have understanding, then it's possible to work to a mutually beneficial solution, right? To perhaps qualify our arguments so that they demonstrate that sense of understanding and empathy to potential objections to an argument, otherwise known conditions of rebuttal. So, one final argument, as mentioned on page 143, the federal government should ban e-cigarettes, and then there's a final description of Toolman argument on page 144. Again, I think that the book does a nice job explaining how to use the strategies from this chapter in our own writing, and they also give us some good examples that we can digest to better understand the strategies themselves. So hopefully everything's clear. Thank you for your time and patience. If you have any questions for me, as always, feel free to get in touch. Stay tuned.